Patricia.
There we go. Yeah, and Patricia just joined us.
Welcome,
Hi, Patricia.
So, apologies for the late start. We have several more people who have signed up, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Jan Brito, and Laura Quigley. Say hi.
Hello.
And then Jessie is our licensed assistant, the girl behind the curtain, the wizard. So, today's topic is the truth about communicating with adult children. Let me just see what's in the chat for a quick minute. Oh, just good morning. That's all. Good morning. Okay. Sorry, you guys can probably see that. So, truth about communicating with adult children. First of all, I'd like to give a brief intro of Capital Senior Solutions and what Laura and I do. Some of you may have heard this before, but for the benefit of those who haven't, we are residential realtors of 18 years now with Compass. We have a team called Brito Associates of Compass. And in 2020, we formed a division of that team called Capital Senior Solutions. And that division focuses on working with older adults as well as their family members who are making late in life transitions, whether it be to a senior community, assisted living community, or a smaller home. We can sell your home if you have one when the time comes to talk about that. But our primary goal, at least initially, is to educate and advocate on behalf of older adults. What qualifies us to do that? Well, we have the basic designation that realtors get when they first get their license called Senior Real Estate Specialist, which is a one-day course. In 2020, we saw some things in our real estate world that really shocked us in terms of how older adults were being treated in some cases. So we sought out a higher level of education so we could understand the psychology, if you will, of working with older adults going through such an important transition, so we could really be able to empathize with them and understand where they're coming from. So we found the Seniors Real Estate Institute in Oklahoma City, and we took a course that resulted in a designation called Certified Senior Housing Professional. This was a very intense, I would equate it to like a graduate level course, and it took us about a year to get through it. It was on Zoom. It was very involved. We had to hold focus groups. We had to tour all different types of communities, do a lot of reading, a lot of research. And then we had to be interviewed by the review board to get the designation, because they wanted to make sure you not only completed the coursework, but that you have a heart for serving older adults. So we passed, yay. And then we went on to get certified as senior downsizing coaches, because many of you on this call have probably experienced the emotions you feel when you start thinking about moving or downsizing. And usually the first thing that stops you is, what the heck am I going to do with all this stuff? So often when we meet with people the first time, it's not anything about selling the house. It's about what to do with the stuff and all the other components involved with a late in life move. So that's who we are. Let me advance the slide. There we go. So I think I will turn it over to Laura now, unless Laura, you had anything else to add in terms of our background and our qualifications?
Nope, I'm ready to jump right in. So the purpose today is communicating with adult children. So I thought I'd start with talking, before we can figure out communicating with this demographic. And when I'm going to use adult children, but in my mind, it's anyone in your life who participates in decision with you. I think there's somebody talking. Okay.
Wendy, I'm going to mute. Yeah, she muted. Okay, thank you.
Great. Yeah, so anyone who is involved in decision making with you. I mean, it could be a niece, a nephew, it could be one of your siblings. So I'm just going to use the term adult children, but when we think about this, let's just think about anyone who you're close to, and a loved one, a friend, family member who helps you when you're making decisions. And, every day in the work that we do, Jan and I, are talking to clients. And, our conversations are usually around, the best place to live, where to move, how to make this process happen, how to make it easier. And for the most part, the clients that we're speaking with are really just like you. They are capable, able-bodied, making decisions on their own. However, we all have a support system and family members. And so when family members become involved, there's a whole new dynamic that gets introduced. So we sort of categorized the types of families that we work with And I thought, as I go through this, kind of keep in your own mind what your situation looks like. And then later on, when we're talking about how to communicate, it might make more sense. It might help you to be like, oh, this is what I'm potentially, working with in my family. So the first type of family are the uninvolved, and that could be for many, many reasons, but truly there is nobody by your side helping you through this decision making. You're making the decisions about your future. The second is the supportive, available if needed. Like, we'll meet with you. We know you have family. We know they're supporting in whatever decision you're going to do, but they're just going to stay in the background. And if you want them for something, they'll be available. If you need help on a certain day, or you want to tour a community and you'd like somebody's opinion, they'll be there to support you. And then we have the supportive and actively involved. That's when they're like, I want my hands in this mix. I want to be part of the conversation. I'm going to be respectful of my parents, or the adults in my life that are making decisions, but I want to know, and I want to be actively involved. Then we have the controlling and unavailable. And you might look at those terms and be like, they don't go together. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But this is a situation where there is a family member who really wants to be part of this decision making, and in fact believes that they have a voice, but they're really not available. Maybe they live far away. Maybe they have a busy job, but they're not going to approve of decisions you're making without being part of the process. Then we have the controlling and actively involved. That typically takes place when the family member is living local. They want to come on all the meetings. They want to have an opinion, and they want to control the decision. The next one is the proxy decision makers by design. And this is where you've decided that there is a loved one, a family member, that you want to be kind of your backup, maybe your power of attorney, your healthcare proxy, somebody that if there's a point in time where you need assistance and help, they will step in for you. And it's been discussed, it's been managed, the paperwork is in place, and you know who those decision makers are going to be. And then the last one, and we do see this, is the proxy decision makers by default. This is when conversations have not been had, paperwork has not been put into place, and something happens, a crisis happens, and then just by default, kind of the next in line in the family comes in and has to make the decisions, or is making the decisions. And they may not be the decisions that you want, but because you haven't put the protections in place, they're the decisions you're going to get. So, like I said, think about this as we're going through the presentation. This will sort of categorize yourself, your families, your relationships, and then think about what kind of relationships you'd like to have, because it's not too late to change them, right? As we're going through this. So let's talk now about communications. And that would be the next slide, Jan. Yeah. So that I always laugh when I look at this slide, because anyone who's taken communications 101 in college or whatever, they always talk about the communications cycle, right? You have a sender, they send a message, the receiver gets the message, and then they give feedback. And it makes it look like it's like this simple little process of a flow of communication. But what this slide really should have is a bunch of wiggly lines all over it, because there's all sorts of stuff that gets in the way, right? Personalities, distance, is this over the phone or is this in person? Behavioral styles, past history, social cues, where this conversation takes place, how it takes place, the conversation that's used, and the receiver's perception of that, that language. So it's not as easy as this. And if we look at the next slide, we can talk about the truths about communication. And I thought this was really interesting that, yes, we verbally communicate, but in reality, we are communicating constantly in many other forms. So 55% of your communication is how you appear. So, are you looking healthy? Are you standing strong? Are you projecting? that's all going to come across in the message that you're sending. And then 38% is how you sound. All right. What is your tone? Are you speaking quietly? Are you speaking loudly? Are you like, how emphatic are you? So that's how you sound. So how you look, how you sound. And actually only 7% of communication results from actually what the words you used and what you said. So I want to give an example. And I think this really hits home is, let's say, for example, something minor happens. You have a fall. You go to the hospital, everything is fine. You had a fall, you're now going to go to rehab. You're feeling fine. You just maybe have a broken limb that needs to be rehabbed. But your loved one, your decision maker person, comes to see you. And what do they see? They see you in a hospital bed, right? So what do they see? They see weakness. They see incapacity. So although you are verbally saying, I'm fine, this is good, I know what I'm doing, that's not what they're seeing. That's not the cue that they're getting. So you can see how that, can cause misinterpretations with communication. So, so the best way to communicate is in person, when you're feeling healthy, strong, and capable. I always think of like the Superman stance, like if you're standing strong, you can communicate your message. So let's talk about some of the topics that you're going to need to communicate. And for me, this is inevitable, right? At some point, you're going to have these conversations with someone in your life. I don't know who that someone's going to be, but we are all aging. It is a fact of life. It's happening to all of us. So it's inevitable that you are going to need some help. You're going to transfer some decision-making responsibilities, and the management possibly of day-to-day responsibilities. So you want to establish the ground rules around that. Like what triggers it? So let's say I meet with my son and I say, at this point, I want you, I'll give an example, to take my car keys away, right? Or whatever. So what is that point? What is the boundary that will establish, that will say, this is when I need you to step in for me? Hopefully that makes sense. And we have a nice small group today. So if anyone has questions, like throw them in the chat or raise your hand, we'd love to make this interactive if you want. So then let's think. So again, this is about the what if conversations. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, those are the conversations that you need to start thinking about, your finances, your money management. How are you currently living? How would you like to live in the future? And what support might you need in your current situation and as you're aging? You may know that you have a health condition that is going to require further help. So it's kind of good to get ahead of and make a plan for that. I mentioned the driving. This is one of the biggest ones, driving. When should you stop driving? And is it when you believe it, or when your children or some other loved one comes to you and says you should stop? Getting and managing medical and personal care. If you want to have care in the house. I mean, the point of the, activities of daily living, where are you on that scale? Is it about time that maybe somebody could be coming in and helping? And what does that look like? And then your end of life arrangements. And this is really interesting. As a society and as people, we tend to do a pretty good job of this, end of life arrangements. We make the plan, we pick a funeral home, we pick how, our disposition. But what we don't do a good job of is from healthy to end of life. What we're talking about today, these topics, that plan over time. Studies show that, once you hit 65, you're going to start needing some assistance at some point as you age. And if you live to 80, studies show that there's a good likelihood that you're going to live to be 100. So these topics are all things that we're going to all need to address. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, let's move on and talk about this. Jan and I call these the truths, kind of the truths of this. And the first truth is your adult children your loved ones, your family members that love and support you, they are having conversations about you with or without your knowledge. It's happening. And you might say, well, how do Jan and I know that? We know that because they call us. We get calls all the time from family members saying, it's time for mom and dad to move. Come over and list their house. Jan and I became certified downsizing coaches because of this exact call, because we go over to mom and dad's house and the adult children are there, and we can tell right away, mom and dad are not moving. They don't want to move. They are not prepared to move. And this is going to be a very unfortunate, uncomfortable, possibly ugly dynamic in this family. So we can just become the downsizing coaches and help bring people together to make these decisions. So don't assume no one's talking about you. They are. And then your children, the adult children, again, the loved ones in your life that are helping you, they have conflicting roles as caregivers. They want to take care of us. They want us to have a good life. They want to care for us. But they also want it to be convenient. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm saying that as all of us in life want our lives to run smoothly. So it's this sort of conflict of how am I a caregiver for my parent, or provide the resources my parent needs, or have the conversation that my parent needs. But at the same time, I have this busy life over here where I might be juggling a job and children and other responsibilities. And then this other truth, aging creates conflicting goals for individuals. What we mean by that is we all want autonomy and control. I say all, but I do believe most people want to be in control of their own decision-making, their own destiny. But as we age, we do need assistance and support. So that there's that balance of, I don't want to ask for help, but I need help, and trying to reconcile that within ourselves and then communicate, what that help looks like. And then lastly is effectively communicating between yourself and your loved ones. That is a shared responsibility. That's a two-way street. You don't want people making decisions about you, but you have to be clear on what you want. Another truth that I'm going to throw out here that's not on the slide is we very often hear adult children saying to us, mom and dad are going to move closer to me. Maybe that's out of state someplace or a different community. And they may not have had that conversation with mom and dad because possibly they want to stay in their community with their doctors, with their friends, that they want to age someplace where they feel safe, and moving to, Arizona is not what they want. So that's another good conversation to have. So let's move on and we can start talking about preparing for the talk. And Jan, do you want me to keep going, or are you going to jump in?
Yeah, you can keep going if you like.
Okay. So preparing for the conversation. So we've given you a lot of topics to think about. So a couple things. You want to communicate your needs, your wishes. And you have to think about, and I find this really interesting because I have made mistakes in this area. Who needs to be part of that conversation? It's not always clear. Maybe we've seen this happen where there's multiple children and the parents are selecting one child to be the power of attorney or to do their healthcare proxy, but they don't include the other children in the conversation, and that it's immediately conflict. Even if the other children agree with that decision, not being part of it makes them feel disrespected or, not important to the parents. So thinking about who has to be part of the conversation is very important. And then what is the goal of the conversation? You don't want to have a lot of goals. You want to have maybe this is our initial conversation to start talking about the fact that I'm your mother and I'm aging, and there's things that I want to talk about. And then this other point sort of goes to what I already mentioned. To make things work for everyone, the solution does have to take into account the needs of the people who are going to support you. So I think the next slide goes into some steps on that. Oh, roadblocks. Okay. Yeah. All of these are important roadblocks and things that we don't even think about sometimes. The first one being that we have different communication styles. Some people are very direct. Some people can be very maybe passive aggressive. Some people just sort of wait to be told. So knowing that you're going to have different communication styles and hopefully knowing the people that you want to communicate with, you can kind of prepare for that. Your family dynamics and history. You know, how do your loved ones get along with each other? Are you going to pull in a distant cousin to help you with something versus one of your children? You know, how is that going to work? What is your willingness to communicate your needs? And what is their willingness to hear it? We all bring in our own personal experiences here. Maybe how we've dealt with something like this in the past, maybe how we took care of our parents or how we saw our parents take care of their parents. Our own perceptions of what's right and what should be done could be very different with the people that you're communicating to and helping them to see why it's important to you. And then, excuse me, the ability to see other people's perspectives, how they look at this situation. We very often run into situations where our clients come to us and say, I'm trying to talk to my kids, but they just don't want to hear it. I try to bring up that I'm aging and I want to have these conversations. And they say to me, Mom, you're fine. Don't worry about it. But they're not hearing your concern. So I know that I just threw a lot at you. Again, anyone with any questions or anything in the chat?
No questions in the chat.
Okay.
I just wanted to add that, this seminar is about communicating with adult children, but we say a lot of the same things in our seminar on moving mom and dad. And so we tell everyone involved in this situation to try to approach these conversations with curiosity. View it as an opportunity to understand what your children's concerns are. And like Laura said, it's a tough conversation to have because they don't want to hear it, because that means you're thinking of end of life and it scares them. So, be curious, let them know that you want to be able to plan ahead to ease their burden when the time comes to make decisions. And it's better if they know your wishes ahead of time. It takes a lot of the stress off of them. And then the other thing is choosing the time and place to have these conversations. We've got all these holidays coming up, right? Starting with Thanksgiving, and the other holidays. But I think you want to think about setting a separate time to have a specific conversation, not in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, for instance, or in the middle of a birthday party or an anniversary party. Set up a special time to devote to that conversation. And like Laura said, it may take several conversations, but start with an open mind and curiosity. And I think that will make a difference. And let go of any assumptions you think your children might have about you and tell them what your wishes are. I'm sorry, Laura, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Jan's point about picking the time. We can't tell you how many times clients have come to us and said that their children brought this up over the holidays because it's the time that everyone's gathering. And don't fall into that trap. It's a time for your family to gathering and enjoy being each other is really important. All of these conversations come with a certain level of emotion. And to Jan's point, set aside the right time to do that.
Yeah.
And Jan covered a lot of these things, but I think it's really important to explain your feelings, how you feel about this move. Mm-hmm. And then number 6 is acknowledging what you heard. I mean, they're going to have opinions. And I'm going to throw out just a personal example from myself, how I did this very badly, thinking I was doing it well. We were at a family event, and so we were driving home. I've got my husband in the car, my son and his wife. And so I'm like, ooh, captive audience, right? I got him in the car. I'm going to talk to them about this. And I start talking about my healthcare directive and how my cousin Megan is going to make decisions for me, not my only child. And I'm just talking away, not realizing that it's getting quieter and quieter and quieter in the back seat. Till finally he says, Like, I totally disagree with that. And he was really upset. And I thought, I'm not looking at him. I'm not making eye contact. I didn't set up what it was we were going to talk about. And I have just doomed this conversation to failure. So I even, do these seminars, and we all make mistakes. So back to picking the right place and time.
Yeah, definitely an important decision to make. Laura, do you want to continue or shall I?
Oh, you can.
Okay. So, like we said, set up a specific date and time and place to do this, not at a family event or a celebration of any type, and have a goal in mind, like we said before. And if there's a specific request you want to make of your children, be prepared to discuss that. And then, kind of notice their reactions as well as yours. And like what happened with Laura, you might get that kind of reaction. But I think it's okay to say, I can see this upsets you, but this is, I don't know how you might phrase it, but this is an inevitable thing that's going to happen, death, and we want to be prepared and we want to plan and we want you to know what our wishes are. So that's why we're having this conversation. We don't want to scare you or, make you feel uncomfortable, but it's a necessary conversation. So we really appreciate you being willing to sit and talk with us about this. And then, always end it on a positive note, like showing appreciation, that sort of thing. And then if it becomes combative in any way, or you get some significant pushback, it might be time to take a break and come together again later for another conversation, right? Let them process what they've heard so far, mull it over, digest it, process it, and then maybe a couple weeks, a month later, have another conversation. I think the more they hear about it and have time to think about it, they might realize where you're coming from and be more willing to have a more intense conversation about what your wishes are. Would you add anything to that, Laura?
No, I love the idea of taking a break, and you can also make that plan. Okay. And I will say, very often these conversations, as soon as you start to try to have them, the first reaction is, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Are you sick? Is dad sick? What's happening? And you don't want to be at that point having those conversations. So it's great to have them now when you're healthy, you're strong, and you can be very clear and articulate what it is you're looking for.
Right. And notice she said what you're looking for. So you have this conversation while you can still make these plans for yourself and not have your children's be the ones to have to decide, while you're still healthy and cognitively aware and, can communicate that. Mm-hmm. All right. So in terms of feedback, we talked about communications in the various styles, whether it's body language or what you say and so forth. So there are verbal responses and there are nonverbal responses. So it's important to be aware of the body language that your children are exhibiting. And then it's okay to ask for questions or clarification, and same of them, expect that of them. They might want to have follow-up questions and clarify what it is you're saying. And then again, you might experience some avoidance, which we've already talked about. I think it's important to end it, like we said, on a positive note, but also with next steps or action items and who's going to be doing what, even if the next step is simply to schedule another meeting to continue the conversation. Because if you get that pushback, if you get the deer in the headlight look from your child, what's happening? Are you dying? What's going on? Are you sick? Take a break and have another conversation. And then you want to make sure that your message was received and understood. So that's really important.
And the way to do that is to ask those questions, and clarify, have them maybe even paraphrase back what your intention is here or what you're trying to get at.
And another thing we haven't talked about, I think it's important to plan to have enough time for this conversation. Don't make it when you've got a meeting you've got to get to or some other event, you're watching the clock. Make it at a time when you can take whatever time is needed to be comfortable and just slow down a little bit. So here, whoops, back up. Some conversation invitations, some samples some verbiage that you might use. So for instance, you're on this seminar today. So after Thanksgiving, you might have a conversation with one of your adult children or all of them and say, I went to this seminar the other day and I want to share with you some information that I learned. When's a good time that we can get together to do that? And I mean, that's not a scary question, right? So that should be easy to set up. Another one would be, your dad and I are making estate plans and we'd like to share with you what we're thinking. That can be a scary question because, again, they might think, what's happening? But it's, a question that would start the conversation. When would be a good time for us to schedule a time to talk? I've got some important things, some things that are important to me that I want to run by you. So these are just some examples of conversation invitations. And then for conversation starters, you might say, I realize we may be entering some uncharted territory in the future as I have more birthdays. I've put some thoughts down on paper and would like to talk to you about it. Another example might be, my goal is to make life easier on both of us. So I've written down some things that I feel are important, and your feedback and questions are welcome. I think that's a really good one because it makes them understand that you have written down some things that you would like them to know, but you do welcome their feedback and questions. So
has anyone on the seminar started having these conversations or have used any of these types of starters? Or can you picture a starter you would use?
Wendy, you probably had some conversations with your kids. But yeah, if there's anything anybody wants to share, just unmute or raise your hand.
Sure.
But we've come to the end of our presentation. So if there are questions or concerns or anything you'd like to chat about, unmute yourself and chime in. In the meantime, we wanted to let you know, and I think everyone here knows about our Downsizers Club and has been to some of our meetings, but this is a free service that we offer on the first Friday of every month at 11 a.m. via Zoom. And it's meant to be a small support group to discuss the challenges and opportunities that you have to consider when you're thinking about downsizing or even modifying your homes to age in place. So we share resources, successes, challenges. We have a fun little homework wheel that we have everybody click their mouse and it spins a wheel and it gives you an assignment for the next month on what area of your home to work on. Like you might get gloves and hats or kitchen utensils or holiday cards. And it keeps you focused because, as you all know, you can't do this all at once. And it's really overwhelming. And it's something you should start early so that you can take your time and enjoy the memories that these items bring you as you're looking through them. And so it's a really good resource and we have a lot of fun with it. We had our 1-year anniversary in August. We have had a couple graduations, meaning people that have sold their home and moved on. So it's been a great resource. I don't know if anyone on the call wants to share their experience of the club and if you found it helpful. But we do see the same people coming back again and again. So we appreciate that. It's become a little family sort of thing.
I have can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm on my phone and I was having trouble finding the mute button
Yes.
because my screen it's an old phone and my screen is so small. But at any rate, yes, I just want to say that I've really enjoyed all your Zooms, all the downsizing things. I'm moving extremely, extremely slowly, but this is all very helpful. I also wanted to mention that I did a lot of planning a long time ago and had thought about it. And now, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's almost like I'm thinking more about dying than living because all this stuff is just, overwhelming me. So now I have to go back and think, did I give this to the kids? Did I give this to the lawyer? I'm thinking of making an appointment, going back to my lawyer to say, what do you have for me? And it's hard, and my son is saying, Mom, where do you want to move, because I don't want to have to come up there in the winter if you follow you on the ice. And it's just my head is spinning, but I am just trying to go one step at a time. But one thing I wanted to say, and you did bring up, is thinking about the relationship you had with your parents. And mine was so different because I was in town. My other family members had moved away, but I was there. I knew everything about, my mom. I knew where things were in the house. I went to the bank with her. I helped to sell her house. I knew where all her possessions were. I knew where all her important documents were. And with me, it's the complete opposite. My kids have lived away for years and years. When they come here, I say, oh, this is in the file cabinet. This is here. This is there. I use this bank. But it's just hard. It's just really, really hard when you don't have anybody, in town with you that's familiar with what's going on in your life. So I just wanted to mention that. And, that's just another thing that I'm personally dealing with. I don't know about other people, but that's
Yeah,
all.
I'm sure that's quite
Oh, and
common.
I don't know if I'll be able. Yeah. And the other thing is you mentioned the downsizing meeting, and it's funny because while we were just doing this, I got a couple of text messages about a group of friends from work that want to have a meeting, go to lunch December 1st. And I think that's our next downsizing meeting. So I may or may not be there, but I'll be
Okay.
thinking of you all.
Okay.
But
Well, you can always invite your friends to join us another time if they're in the, a downsizing mode. So,
that is true. I have told other people about this.